What's up, guys? Matt here, back with today's edition of Every Day in the Word. We've got some more Judges on tap for us today, and it's it's been pretty ugly, but it's going to get more ugly today. We're going to meet this guy named Jephthah, and he is going to be the next judge on tap. We remember the cycle that's going on. The people of Israel, they sin, they fall into oppression from their enemies. Then they cry out for help. God gives them a deliverer or a judge, and that judge will stand up and lead the people of Israel out of their distressful situation. And today we meet this guy named Jephthah, and they were dealing with the Ammonites at this point, so some more enemies that had overtaken them. And Jephthah here, he is the second half of chapter 11. We're reading 11 and 12. Chapter 11 and 12, but in the middle of chapter 11, we see this famous vow that Jephthah makes. He tells God, "Hey, God, I will sacrifice anything that walks out of my front door, if you give me this victory right now. If you let me defeat the Ammonites." And God does let him defeat the Ammonites, and then his daughter walks out of the door. And then he realizes that was a really stupid thing for him to do, is make that vow to God that he was going to sacrifice anything that walks out of that door, because his daughter now walks out of the door. And so he's got to sacrifice his daughter. And again, this is not a pretty time in Israel's history, and Jephthah was not the godliest man in the Bible. But he makes that vow to God, and he does keep that vow, and he sacrifices his daughter, which is a big deal because the people of Canaan, the Canaanites, they were really into child sacrifices. One of their gods demanded that they sacrifice their children, so that was a tradition that they had. And so Jephthah right here is really acting just like the Canaanites, even though he made this vow to God. So really dumb decision for him to do that. But he does follow through on his word, so he does keep that promise, which, if there's a silver lining, I guess that's good. But still, again, sacrificing your child is not something that the Bible prescribes for you to do. But again, it just is a really not dangerous, but really sad book with a lot of bad stuff going on. So now let's go over to the book of John. Actually, we finished Luke yesterday, and so we're starting the book of John, which I'm excited to do because the book of John is one of my favorites in the Bible. It's just so different than the other three Gospels, the synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. This Gospel, it really dives deep into some teaching that Jesus has. It dives deep into some rich theology. Not that there's not rich theology in the other synoptics, but again, I love this book, and it'd be really helpful if you guys would be reading this along with me. So if you haven't read the first few verses, you can start right now. But we're going to read the first 28 verses of John chapter 1. And we see the famous verse of John 1:1, that in the beginning the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that is talking about Jesus, talking about Jesus' divinity, that he is God. A lot of people have mistranslated that verse and taken that verse wrong, and had all of these different translations, like the Jehovah's Witnesses. They do not believe that, or they translate this differently to fit their theology. But it's really important for us to understand that Jesus is God, and that's what the book of John is all about, describing how Jesus is the Son of God and how he is 100% man, but also 100% God. So we're going to see that theme play throughout this book. But then we meet John the Baptist here. We know him, obviously. He's the guy that basically sets up Jesus' ministry. He's kind of the forerunner, if you will, to Jesus' ministry, preaching the gospel, preaching repentance. I guess the gospel hasn't technically happened at this point yet, but preaching repentance and baptizing people. And John the Baptist, super important character, so keep an eye on him throughout the reading of this book. But John chapter 1, great chapter for you to meditate on today. But now let's go over to the book of Psalms. We've got Psalm 101 today, Psalm 101. And we're going to get into this section of Psalms where I really like this section of Psalms because they're all about praising God. And I think that's something that we can take every single day. I take that what we're learning here and basically translated that into a prayer. And so we can be praying these Psalms here. So Psalm 101 is where we're at today. Again, I really like what he says here in verse 3. He says, I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. And then he just goes on about how he's going to walk in integrity, walk in fear of God. And we're going to see, as we continue through the Psalms, we're going to see the psalmist continually direct his praise to God. We don't see it as much in this one, but we see just a commitment about obeying God, a commitment to submitting to God. And that is a form of worship of God. We think about Romans chapter 12, verse 1, talking about us being a living sacrifice of God. If we are a doulos to God, if we are a slave to God and a slave to righteousness, that means that our lives look differently because of that, and that's what the psalmist is conveying here in Psalm 101. So good stuff in the Psalms, but now let's finish it up with Proverbs chapter 14, verse 13. He says, even in laughter the heart may ache, and the end of joy may be grief. The backslider in heart will be filled with the fruit of his ways, and a good man will be filled with the fruit of his ways. Kind of confusing when you read that, backslider. We typically hear that word, and we don't associate good things with that word. But the backslider in heart says will be filled with the fruit of his ways. So if you are a backslider, which basically we're just talking about people that, not in a technical way, but people that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not bearing fruit. And again, we don't believe that you can backslide as a Christian. Christians are in a process of sanctification where you're continually pursuing growth even more and more than you did yesterday. But basically, what this is trying to say here is you backslide, you get lazy. You're gonna get the fruit of that laziness, which is not good stuff. But if you are the one who is a good man, he'll be filled with the fruit of his ways. So basically, what this is talking about here is there's cause and result. Cause and result. There's obedience, and then there's blessing, or there's disobedience and cursing, like we were seeing through the book of Deuteronomy when we read that a few weeks ago. But again, an important reminder for you that your actions matter, and you're going to get rewarded. You're going to reap what you sow. So make that what it is. Make that what it will for your life, whether that's doing good things or whether that's a warning for not doing the bad thing. And again, good reminder from Proverbs. It's always good to reflect on a couple verses from the Proverbs as we finish up our videos every day, because it's a reminder of just something that you can take right away and start applying as soon as this video ends. So hopefully that's something that you can do today. You can reap and you can sow, and hopefully those will be good things, not bad things. So we'll see you again tomorrow for another edition of Every Day in the Word. But until then, hopefully you're able to live out what we were reading today.